News every 15 minutes, weather every 10, and sports twice an hour.
Newstalk, KGVO, AM 1290 and 98.3 FM.
You're listening to Montana Morning with Peter Christian.
A Missoula man stabbed in the chest near a local donut shop. Good morning, it's John King filling in for Peter Christian. Your news this morning brought to you by Dig It Excavation, bringing 30 years of excellence to every job. For all of your excavation needs, call them at 214-4292. Well, Missoula police responded to a call for help early yesterday morning near the Krispy Kreme donut shop. Missoula Police Public Information Officer Travis Welsh says they ended up rushing a man to the hospital for a stab wound.
Officers were called to the report of a man claiming that he'd been stabbed at a different restaurant in the 2900 block of Brook Street. He has an injury that seems consistent with some kind of an edged weapon. The injury is to the center of his chest, and we don't know the severity at this point because we can't say for certain whether or not the weapon actually penetrated his rib cage.
Welsh says blood was found at the scene, but no weapon has been recovered. The victim reports that he was stabbed after approaching two men that he suspected of theft.
He had encountered a couple males inside of a passenger car that he believed belonged to one of his family members that had been reported stolen about a week earlier. That part of the case is being investigated to try to confirm whether that's in fact true or not. At this point, we have officers on the scene who are processing evidence that was discovered there.
But there's an extra glaze of mystery. The story took an interesting turn after police investigated that stolen car claim. Apparently, nobody reported the car stolen. Police say the fight is likely a dispute over ownership of the car and that the victim knows the other two males. He's been treated and released from the hospital, but doesn't apparently want or need help from police. Police say he has, quote, only been semi-cooperative with investigators, end quote. Police also say there is no ongoing threat to the community. They've also asked not to make any donut jokes, which, of course, I wouldn't do. I don't want to wind up behind bars, unless, of course, they're maple bars. After a man and woman were shot to death in a cabin outside of Lolo in January, the third person involved in the incident has been charged with felony theft and evidence tampering. Chief Deputy County Attorney Jason Marks says he filed the charges in March against Anthony Mark Villier. Marks describes the deaths of Tanya Gilliam and Bradley Stover.
Mr. Stover and Miss Gilliam had been drinking heavily all day, discussing buying a gun from Mr. Stover, which was the gun involved, and that seemingly out of nowhere, Mr. Stover discharged a gunshot that struck and killed Miss Gilliam. Mr. Villier said he then attempted to wrestle the gun away from Mr. Stover, and in the course of that, a single shot was fired, which is what killed Mr. Stover.
Mark said the investigation continued, resulting in Villier's arrest.
A significant amount of cash that Mr. Stover was reported to have on his person was missing, and Mr. Villier, who was on a very limited fixed income, had deposited a very large sum of money 3 days after the shooting, and it was determined that after the shooting he had taken the cash from Mr. Stover's pocket and subsequently deposited it.
Villier is currently free on pretrial supervision, but his arraignment in district court is scheduled for April 11th. Governor Steve Bullock has vetoed a bill that would have banned Sharia and other foreign laws from being used in Montana courtrooms. In his veto message on Thursday, Bullock said the measure would, quote, upend our legal system and debase what we stand for as Montanans and Americans, end quote. Montana was one of 13 states considering legislation seeking to prevent the use of foreign law in state courts. The Montana Senate voted 42-8 to pass HB 541, the so-called brewery bill, yesterday during a hearing. The bill has gone through significant changes as it winds through the legislature, but sponsor Adam Hertz says he brought the bill hoping to increase business opportunities for Montana breweries.
Current state law limits breweries that have a tap room to brewing only 10,000 barrels of beer a year. So if you have a tap room like most of the breweries in Missoula do, you're capped at brewing 10,000 barrels a year, at which point you need to either decide to close your tap room or cap your production, which is not good for these small Montana businesses.
The so-called brewery bill passed through the House relatively unchanged and would have increased the number of beer barrels allowed from 10,000 to 60,000 per year.
And so it would allow breweries like Big Sky Brewery to operate tap rooms, and Bayern Brewery, which pushes up against that 10,000 barrel limit cap every year, shuts down their distribution to grocery stores and restaurants. would allow them to continue to operate their businesses, to invest, to grow jobs, grow the economy, and hopefully ship more beer out of state.
But the bill was changed significantly by the Senate Business and Labor Committee, which added amendments reducing the number of barrels allowed to just 12,000, adding a tax, and making changes that would effectively halt the operation of the Northside Kettle House tap room. Hertz says those amendments, quote, made it a bad bill, end quote, but was relieved that most were stripped back out yesterday. The bill is back up for a hearing on Friday, that's today, and will likely go through conference committee next week. A Billings man who served 2 decades in prison for killing his wife has been sentenced to 40 years in prison for assaulting his girlfriend. The Billings Gazette reports that a judge went above the prosecutor's recommendation of 15 years in sentencing Joe Belmarez on Thursday. The judge says Belmarez has a lack of remorse and cited his history of violence. Montana Senator Steve Daines addressed the U.S. Senate on Thursday afternoon to declare his intention to confirm Judge Neil Gorsuch to the U.S. Supreme Court later on Friday.
One of the most consequential votes that I'll ever cast is a vote to confirm a United States Supreme Court nominee. It's a lifetime appointment to our nation's highest court. And in fact, tomorrow when I cast that vote for Judge Gorsuch, it'll be the first chance I've had as a senator to confirm a Supreme Court nominee.
Daines castigated his colleagues in the Democratic Party for conducting a filibuster to delay the vote.
As it stands today, the United States Senate is on the precipice of confirming Neil Gorsuch to be our next United States Supreme Court Associate Justice. Just a few short hours ago, my colleagues on the other side caved to the pressures of the far left and unleashed an unprecedented partisan filibuster. First time in 238 years of this institution.
By the way, Montana Senator John Tester joined that group. Daines says he was looking forward to casting his vote later today to make Neil Gorsuch the 9th U.S. Supreme Court Justice.